Summer 1980. The road to Kibbutz Degania on the banks of the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee, Kinneret. 70 years ago, a handful of youngsters from middle-class Eastern European backgrounds arrived at this untamed site, determined to create a new world, a world without exploiter or exploited. They were one of the many concrete manifestations of the Zionist movement, springing out of 2,000 years of dispersal, persecution, and the dream of return to the national homeland. Degania, the first kibbutz, the mother of communal settlements. This is the story of three of its women. Yona ben Yaakov. Born in Tsarist Russia, she joined Degania in 1918. After many years as a farm laborer, she shifted to kibbutz education and is today in charge of the kibbutz archives. Yoya Bark-Shpiרא was born in Degania. Her parents, Joseph and Miriam Baratz, were among the original founders of the kibbutz and became legends in their own lifetime. Kibbutz raised, she served in the army, worked as a farm laborer, and is today in charge of the laundry. Sarah Shefer is a third-generation kibbutz member. After schooling in the kibbutz and service in the army, she studied education and now works with the kibbutz children. She and her husband Yitzhak have one daughter. It isn't nice to tell a lady she's a monument. Someone once said that to Golda Meir, and she was insulted. Yona would not define herself as a monument either. But how else can one describe people who volunteer, not for gain, recognition, or some kind of ego trip, but simply because they are expected to fulfill their duty? Yona remembers.
We arrived at night. It was a full moon. In those days, you came to Degania by boat. There was no bridge. We came on a moonlit night. What a dream it was. I was walking that little alley which leads to the Jordan River, drunk with the scent of lemon groves. That spring night, that scented, breathing air, that was Degania. And then the people, above all the people. To us, to a young girl like me, they were like mythical giants. What bodies, what strength, and in their eyes so much spirit, so much inspiration. I'm not sure I formulated it in those words then, but that was the way I felt. One could lean on them.
An old song in praise of work. Work is our life. Work will save us from sorrow and pain. Not to earn a living, not a duty, but work as a way of life.
I used to load the truck that came with the big boxes of grapefruit because I thought I really have to be, real woman, to work in everything. Our education was to work in a field, to be a real farmer, to know how to grow, to know all the names of every bird and every flower, to be a different Jew, new Jew.
Work comes naturally to Yoya, a second-generation kibbutznik. Yet a member of her parents' generation wrote in his diary, "What is the difference between us and our children? Firstly, the physical work. Our conquest of it was wrought with pain, and the heavier the load, the more glorious the work. For our children, it comes easily. For Jews at the turn of the century, the transition from urban life to working the land was a real revolution. Here at Degania, a firm belief was proclaimed for the first time. All forms of work and profit are equal. The kibbutz as a whole is a direct democracy. The founders of Degania created a Spartan society with an emphasis on high production and low consumption. To be partner to such an endeavor meant work in areas of production, not services. It was obvious that women must be freed from their traditional dependence on husband and domestic duties in order to participate fully and equally in the common effort. This was the reason for bringing up children in their own quarters under the care of especially trained kibbutz members.
לחש אב 3 פעמים ואמר הוקוס פוקוס ואברקדברה וקיליבנג'רו וכוח הדברה. והנה לא יאמן, הוא לא ספר גם עד 5, למטאטא צמחו ידיים ואז הופיעו גם דליים. המטאטא הלך לבור, הורידו דלי, הורידו 2 והעלה למעלה מים מן הבור אל החבית.
To be happy in your work, not to refuse any assignment, to claim no concessions, and also to be a mother, to do everything your child needs. Even though I myself was not trained to look after children, it was the way in which one combined one's various duties. One had to master this way. But there's something I must say. I think that the kibbutz woman had to fight harder than the kibbutz man. Today you talk about self-realization and self-fulfillment. I'm talking about self-conquest. Self-conquest was a hard struggle, for me at any rate. It was a difficult fight. I worked a lot with the chickens, for example. Night and day under the harsh conditions of those days. It was hard work, and I was completely immersed in it. The fact was that if I didn't manage well, and if not enough chicks would emerge from the incubator, I would wake up in the morning with a sense of catastrophe, in a panic, as if someone had died. And at the same time, I was pulled apart by the need to be more with my children. And I knew that that just couldn't be. I would either work or spend more time with my children. There was always a knife-edge balance between working and being more with my children. And it always ended, of course, in favor of the work.
Those were days of soul-searching and self-questioning. The women fought for their right to undertake any and all responsible tasks: farming, defense, public affairs. The cowshed at Degania became a symbol of success in this struggle. Farming formed the sole basis of kibbutz economy for many years. But as times changed, it became apparent that maintaining a viable economy based on agriculture alone would be difficult. Thus, various industries were established. Industries and sophisticated farming methods brought economic prosperity, and with it, change. Not so much in the basic nature of the kibbutz, but in a stronger emphasis on consumption and services. What does it look like, this dream that has become a reality? Joseph Bussel, one of the founders, wrote, Many generations of life in full equality are needed to make man think and feel as he should in a communal life. Degania has 280 members, including third and fourth generations. What is it like to be descended from revolutionary pioneers? How do Sarah and her friends feel about Yona and Fanya, and about the principles for which they fought so hard?
תשים את זה ככה, שזה יהיה ישר. אז זה יצא. נראה. ושם למעלה... תדעו לכם שיהיה באורך שלי. כן, שם למעלה יהיה... אתם חושבים שאני אלך כמו, אני לא יודע כמו.
When Yitzchak and I began to share a tent, my mother just couldn't accept that there was no wedding, no chuppah, no dowry, no family celebration. I was their oldest. She sat up nights and days embroidering 2 white piqué blankets for me. And afterwards, wait, listen what happened. You think the others knew about it? I was so ashamed. So my mother sent me this and another set of linen. She knew I was living in a tent. Some sort of china basin and a jar and something else for the night. We had no toilet facilities. That was what she sent. And when I saw it, such a bourgeois affair. I could not possibly own things like that. That's the way it was. Everything was sent back immediately. That's my monogram. My mother wept. I can just imagine my mother's grief. But in the course of time, I grew more sensible, and slowly everything was sent back to me here.
Bourgeois affairs don't frighten Sarah. She and the other women of her generation devote much of their time to beautification and the assertion of their femininity. For their grandmothers, these were not only forbidden luxuries, but symbols of the decadence they had vowed to eradicate from their lives. In 1960, one of Yona's friends received a note saying, "Why don't you drop into the clinic for a facial?" Her shocked reaction was, "After 30 years on the kibbutz, such a suggestion upset me. In the most beautiful years of my life, I fought for the right to work in the fields. I neglected myself, abandoning my body to the sun and the hot desert winds, which carved lines in my face, hands, and neck. Isn't it enough that I've had to abandon the soil? Must I now erase its traces from my body as well?" The kibbutz dining room, a weekday. Apart from those regularly assigned here, everyone takes turns at dining room work. This is the meeting place. Here, plans and arrangements are made. Everyday affairs and matters of principle are discussed, recalled, exchanged. This time, the conversation centers around methods of child rearing on the kibbutz.
Bussel went very far in his thinking. He said something else, that we are all partners in everything, that everything belongs to the group as a whole, and not to the individual.
Yona and Mordechai remember the arguments that accompanied the development of this method. Yona also recalls the ideological basis for this method.
And the child, our most precious possession, should the child be owned by the family? The child too belongs to everybody.
A newly born baby would be brought straight to the children's home, rather than to his parents. Here he would spend the formative years until adulthood. Here he would live, study, and play in communal life with other children of his own age. From the outset, the reasons were practical. The economic burden of child-rearing would not fall on the family, and the mothers would be free to work in the fields. Yoya's mother wrote in her diary, "When you arrived this year, I laid you down in the manger. The other women were upset, and visitors thought it all wrong. I won't say it didn't hurt me, but the work didn't suffer. I knew happiness and joy in my work."
I remember being bathed. Who could ever forget that room, the Primus stove with the tin cauldron over it? Child after child was put into the bath. You know, when I'm lying down, I sometimes ask Avraham to wrap me up in a blanket, because when I recall how Mother used to wrap us up in a blanket after our bath, it is one of the warmest and nicest memories I have.
Sarah was also raised in the children's house. However, her child and its contemporaries have a different upbringing. They return to their parents' home in the late afternoon and, until bedtime, have the full attention and dedication of their mothers and fathers, just as in any other bourgeois home. Changes in the lifestyle of the kibbutz are a constant point of argument for Sarah and her husband Yitzhak.
It's because under those circumstances, because a married man with children has no problems about studying while a woman can't.
With the rise of consumption and service facilities, more and more women found themselves being diverted from the equally shared jobs of farmer, guard, and manager to the so-called women's jobs of teacher, nurse, and kitchen worker. Who is to blame for this change? Sarah accuses society. Yitzhak blames the women themselves.
They're pushed in a certain direction. You yourself said they're trained to work in education.
Is education a restriction?
No, that's not education. Education is what you learn from the day you're born.
Hold on a moment. You just said they're told from the beginning that they're restricted. How are they restricted? Because they work in education? I don't see that as a restriction.
I regard it as a restriction. Why can't they do physical work in the banana plantation? That's ridiculous.
I worked on bananas for 3.5 years. I tried to get 4 girls to work there. They all left. It's hot. It's a long day's work, and you just can't make it any shorter. A lot of them started off as big heroes. Even Shulamit said when she started, "No problem, I can work like a man." And the work started to get less and less and less. It's apples here and supermarkets there. I don't have any complaints. But she wants it. She didn't have to do it.
That's all theoretical. And you know why? Because when a girl gets home from the army, they tell her, work in a cowshed for a year, work on bananas for a year. But afterwards, they don't let a woman do anything apart from looking after children. Nothing helps.
During the past 12 years, girls came and tried. And maybe they're still ready to try, up to a certain point, as long as their comfort is not affected. And I have a feeling that their comfort is much more important than it used to be.
3 o'clock in the morning. The kibbutz laundry. A normal day. Says Yoya, the essence of life is to do a good day's work, no matter where or what it is, as long as it is for the good of all. Work that benefits society, the rejection of personal needs and conveniences. These were the ironclad rules by which Yoya was raised. So it was easy for her to move from production to service tasks. For the founders, the personal example had an educational value. But is a personal example sufficient?
Yoya's mother was a rebel when she said, "Men and women are equal. Why should men work in the fields and women stay in the kitchen?"
Maybe it's nature or something that, but I think that you are the way you feel. Yeah. Anywhere you work and anything you do, if you like it and if you do it really in all your heart, and you give to this your thought and your, then it's the same. I heard my mother till her last days. I wrote her diary also, the way she thought that we should behave. And she never thought we have to be like her.
What did she think you have to be?
She thought we have to be happy. We have to believe in what we are doing. But if we believe and if we are happy, it doesn't matter.
Shavuot, the Pentecost, the Harvest Festival, the vigorous display of a prosperous society, homage to work and achievement.
בשנה של אינפלציה ושאר קיצוצים, לוותר על הגדרות ונאומים מחוצים. ולכן מיד, בעיקר תוך כדי, הבאת חיבורי
The pioneers aspired to create a paradise on earth and feared that, once successful, man would be banished from it. Were they, to some extent, the symbol of Zionism at that time?
We used to have faith in everything. We never despaired. We knew we had our whole future in front of us. We were certain we'd make it. We knew that this was the way. Work, work, work. For us, work was the symbol. Farming was the symbol.
They were also satisfied with whatever they had, with every little thing. What I have is enough. You know, I have a photograph of my mother sitting with her hands like this. They were the hands of hard work, for stroking and petting me, the hands which used to bathe me, which moved about as she talked to me. With her hands or her wrinkles. It's really something. You don't find people like them anymore.
You won't find people like them anymore, unless you pay a visit to this cemetery on the banks of Lake Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. Here, among others, lies the poetess Rachel, who captured the spirit of those pioneering days.
Here it is. The Life of Rachel. Rachel's songs and poems with a translation. She never married. She never had children. Because of her illness. She was young, but they couldn't cure her. It was in 1920, and they couldn't accept sick people since everybody had to work very hard, and there were very few people. So she moved to Tel Aviv and lived in some small attic. She was very, very poor, and she died.
The poetess Rachel, a song of yearning for Degania. It may be these things never did occur. Perhaps, somehow, I never did arise at break of day to do my labors in the garden with a sweat of my brow. Did never, in the long and fiery days of harvest time, high on the wagon laden with its sheaves, lift up my voice in rhyme. Did never bathe within the blue and quiet of thy stream. O my Kinneret, O Kinneret mine, were you indeed? Or did I dream a dream?